Left more.
Native Americans had no idea of the losses and turmoil their loss of faith.
And white settlers migrated west onto their homeland in the 1600s. But by the mid-1850s, not only would they have no land, resources, or food to live on, their people would be ignored and forgotten for decades to come. True justice would never be served to the Native Americans, and most likely never will. Today I'm going to explain an event called the Dakota Uprising, what caused the event, what it was, and what amounted because of it. The first white settlers in the Minnesota Territory were French fur traders. These men were the first Europeans to see the prosperous land of what
Now in Minnesota, and all of the valuable resources which reside.
Fur was a very popular thing in Europe, middle 1600s. And when those French fur traders got to Minnesota, they noticed there was a lot of little critters running around. And they also noticed that Native Americans knew exactly how to catch them. So, they also noticed that the Native Americans were fighting their own wars. It was the Dakota and Ojibwe mostly. And they knew that guns were probably a little more effective than bow and arrows and guns. So they decided to trade guns for fur to start out, and then alcohol for fur, which in turn got the Native Americans addicted, which wasn't really good. Like the rest of us. So more whites continued to migrate to Minnesota. They noticed that it was great for farming, so people started coming in. But the fur traders didn't really like that people would come. And they were realizing that there's a lot of money in fur, and there's a lot of fur in Minnesota. So they wrote books back to Europe saying that these Native Americans are savages. They don't know what they're doing. They're running around killing everything. They have no idea what's going on. So they kind of lied. So people wouldn't come over and they could keep all the fur for themselves and take all the land. And then the United States decided they wanted to keep taking land. They wanted to keep taking all the resources of the Native Americans and kind of take advantage of their generosity. So they made some treaties up that happened to be phony. They would promise the Native Americans annuity and that they could still hunt on the land and use all the resources and fish, when really they were going to take advantage. People started just building houses, taking it over, and leaving the Native Americans with really nothing left. Now the tribe I'm focusing on is the Dakota because they were the ones who kind of fought back. About 1860, this is when Abraham Lincoln was in office. He appointed Republicans to pretty much every government role. So we had a drunken lawyer from Shakopee who started to do the accounts with the Native Americans. He had no idea how to talk to the Native Americans and really didn't give a crap about the natives. Him and his buddy Andrew Myrick, that was Thomas Galbraith, I missed that, told the Dakota, let him eat grass. Well, the Dakota had nothing left, and they decided they were going to fight instead of just lay dead. So 7 white settlers were found dead in New Ulm about the summer of 1862. And it was, I'm not sure if it was the Dakotas, but it was probably some starving Dakotas who wanted to get some food. So when the whites heard that, they were disgusted. They were already disgusted. They just wanted the land for themselves. When the Dakota found out, because they weren't sure if it was them or not, but they knew that the whites knew it was, or thought it was the Dakota. So the Dakota, no food, no resources, like, fuck it, sorry. We're fighting back. On August 20th, 1862, 20 white settlers were killed in Dakota Indians, by Dakota Indians, including Andrew Myrick, whose mouth was stuffed with grass. Get it, because he told them to eat grass. So the Dakota caught Minnesota off guard. This is Little Crow. He was appointed as the leader of the Dakota, and he didn't think they had a chance, and he was probably right, but he decided that he wanted to fight with the rest of his group and just see what they could do and have some honor for their tribe, for the history to come. In days to come, 500 to 1,000 whites were killed, still taking off the Americans off guard. And they almost captured Fort Wrigley. Actually, they could almost have an American fort. So at this point, Little Crow knew they had the advantage, and he wanted to strike a deal with the Americans, maybe get some land back and make sure they could still get some food. But his braves decided they wanted to just keep fighting and go for the whole thing. They wanted to just see if they could take over everything or die trying. And then, if you've heard of Henry Sibley High School, there's this guy named Henry Sibley. He was running Fort Snelling, and he came with an army of 1,600 men and wiped Dakota out. 200 men, and Little Crow went off west, ran away. And the rest, they weren't really arrested at first, but they ran home and were ran away. And then Sibley went to the reservation to do the arrests, and arrested 18. That's Henry Sibley, by the way. 18 Dakotas, and kind of tricked them. Because at first he went and got the 18, and then all the Dakota were like, oh, he must be done with the arrest, so they all went back to the reservation. Sibley goes back about a few weeks later, arrests 2,000 more Dakota. This is when he marches all 2,000 from the Dakota reservation all the way to Mankato, where 1,000 more would die from the cold and the exhaustion, from mobs of people coming and beating people to the pulp, throwing scalding water on them. And even, my teacher said, I learned this from another class, throwing babies in the dirt. This is crazy. So when about 1,000 got to Mankato, they were kept outside in the cold. This is about October, December now. Waiting for Lincoln's ruling, because they couldn't do any killings until they got the proof from the president. And while they're waiting, about 400 to 500 more died just in the cold sitting there. And there's a guy named Stephen Miller who was appointed by Lincoln, who was actually almost a hero, one of the biggest European hero in the story, because mobs and angry vigilantes wanted to come and kill the rest of the Dakota sitting in Mankato. But Stephen Miller actually fought them off, and he retained about 400 there. They were living in a log cabin after a while, and enough room for it. So Lincoln decides that 39 Dakota men should be hanged in Mankato on December 26, 1862, and that's what happened. When the Dakota men went up to be hanged, they were singing traditional death songs and smiling and had their faces painted. We're all cheering out each other's names. And then they were hung and buried in a shallow grave in Mankato, where grave robbers went to take jewelry, moccasins, and even skin and body parts to open up souvenir shops to remember this great event in history. The 39 Dakota men who were killed in Mankato in 1862 marched the largest mass execution in American history. And those were just the men who happened to be hung. That is not to mention the thousands who died in the months between the uprising and the execution from starvation and the cold conditions. White settlers migrating to Minnesota was probably inevitable, with the rich soil, beautiful lakes, and the contrast of all four seasons. Who wouldn't want to live in this beautiful place? But with how generous and sharing the Native Americans people were to their new neighbors, it's a shame our European American predecessors couldn't find a way to appreciate it and respect their way of life by accommodating them better with enough food and land to keep them. 500 years ago, the borders of Minnesota didn't exist. That's the name of that. Now they do. But that would never change how good the sun feels on your face, and it doesn't affect how much we love and appreciate our family and friends. The Dakota Uprising resulted in the largest mass execution in American history because a group of people were robbed of their food and chased away from their homes. The Dakota had nothing else to do but fight for their lives, their family, their friends, and to continue feeling the warm sun on their faces for as long as they could. As humans, we cannot and will not know anything better than these simple joys of life. Oh, we're on this earth. It's a shame it's so difficult to share them together.